You've mentioned a few times that you like to pass evals in the afternoon or in a single afternoon. How many contracts, how many trades, and do you copy trade your evals when you attempt to pass them? Yeah, so a lot of good questions here. I've talked about this a lot in the past. I'll go through it very quickly again, so just hang with me here. We have more to come after this one. Depends on the size of the account. Now, the 50K account, let's say an Apex 50K account, let's just use that as an example because that's most popular. All right, so here's what I would do if I was looking to pass in Apex 50K. And again, for those of you guys who are a little bit newer, I try to pass evals in a single afternoon because of opportunity cost. I don't want to be trading evals for days and days and weeks because there's opportunity cost. I'd rather put that mental capital toward trading in a funded, right? And the evals, you know, if we're just being candid, they're too cheap. They are way too cheap for me to be spending all this mental capital trying to go real slow to pass them. So here's what I do in evals. I put the best time of the day, historically, or on average, the morning, the fundeds, 100%. Okay? Primary focus, always going to be fundeds in the morning, right? Then in the afternoon, still, primary focus is going to be fundeds. But if I want to try to pass some evals, or if I need to pass some evals, whatever, then I will in the afternoon. And here's what I would do. If we're doing a 50K Apex, depending on volatility, I would trade 1, 2, or 3 minis to start. 1 mini if volatility is higher, 2 or 3 if it's lower. How many trades? Totally depends. But by the time I get about 2/3 to 3/4, and by the way, let me back up. You guys know I take B- and up setups in fundeds. I do not take any setups that I see as less than B- on the grading scale, on my grading scale. In an eval, I'm trading bigger size, 1 to 3 minis, right? Whereas in a funded, I'll trade, 2 to 5 micros on a 50K. And in the eval, not only am I trading more size, 1, 2, 3 minis, but I'll also take like D+ and up setups. Still the same as I would in the fundeds, but with added lower quality trades. Why? One reason only, opportunity cost. Now, once I get, 2/3 of the way, 3/4 of the way to the finish line, meaning the buffer, passing the eval, that is when, this is my logic, I have now invested more time into that particular eval. And I've made progress. I'm 2/3, 3/4 of the way. So I size down my contract size. I'll oftentimes go down into micro territory into the finish line. So I size down into the finish line. Why? Because I'm now investing more and more time into that particular eval or set of evals. They ask, do I copy trade? It depends. If I only need to pass 1, no, of course, I'll just trade the 1. And I trade it by itself because I'm trading different, I'm trading lower quality setups than I would in the funded. So I'm not, copy trading it with a big set of fundeds, right? I mean, my priority there is I'm spending time this afternoon trying to pass this eval. So I just trade the eval on its own. But if I need to pass like 2 or 3, 4 evals, I'll do so. I'll copy trade them together. Okay. Now, I am not a big fan, and I've gone over this before in a recent Tomb Talk, of trying to pass like 20 at once. Why? Not for any particular reason as far as the evals themselves, but it's because I like to have different starting points in my fundeds. Okay, now, these days I wouldn't be doing that anyway because I have a lot of fundeds already, right? But like, let's say I'm starting over tomorrow. You say, okay, Nico, if you're starting over tomorrow, would you just try to pass 20 all in one day? No, I would try to pass 3 or 4 in afternoon every day. That would be my goal because I like to have, and then I would start trading the fundeds the very next day. When you have different starting points in your fundeds, you don't blow them all in one day. You also don't take payouts on all of them in one day. I see that as totally fine. I would much rather have a trickle, and it's not really a trickle, it's a little more than a trickle, coming into the bank account like, multiple times a week. I mean, that's tremendous. That's like best case scenario, rather than getting one bigger payout like once every however often from all 20 at the same time. That's great for your ego. That's not great for real life, right? And then when you have different starting points, you're also not stressed out if you go into a drawdown because you're like, oh man, if I lose 2 more trades, I lose all 20 of my accounts. And then it's a huge pain and, it costs money to get these fundeds back, which you got to think about if you blow them all at once, especially if you're just getting started. Like that's not, a small amount of money to get 20 fundeds back once you pay the activation fee and everything. Okay, so having different starting points on your fundeds, I think, is a great strategy. And this is another reason why we scale horizontally and you just add. Okay, I passed, 2 evals today. Great. Tomorrow I'll try to pass 4. Oh, great. I passed 5. Now eventually you have 10, 15, 20 fundeds, all with different starting points. When you go into a drawdown, it's no big deal because even if one of them, your back's kind of against the wall, that's totally fine. In a whole bunch of others, you have tons of room. And then one day you're like, okay, I can take payouts on these 3. Oh, in 2 days I can take payouts on these, these 2 accounts. Oh, this Friday I get to take a lot of payouts. I get to take 8 payouts. Okay, and then next Tuesday I get to take a payout from this one account. And then you have a whole bunch of deposits hitting more frequently, which is really, really good for your psychology, especially if you're trying to do this full time. Okay, so I trade big. I trade like D plus and up setups. When I say big, I don't mean 5, 10 minis. In a 50K account, 1 to 3 minis to start, the eval. And I'll trade D plus or up, and I'm scalping. I'll take, the other trades as well, but I'm taking more trades in the eval because I'm taking lower quality in addition than I wouldn't have funded. Then 2/3, 3/4 of the way there, I start sizing down the micros into the finish line because I want a higher probability of reaching the finish line now that I've invested more time into the eval. You guys, your goal here is to make a hefty part-time, probably a full-time, if not more than full-time, right? Income from trading. That's your goal, correct? Let's just be real about it. The evals are too cheap to be spending days and days, weeks and weeks, months and months. I've seen people doing this on like 1 or 2 evals. They're too cheap. That doesn't mean just go gamble them. The way that I'm doing it, for me, man, it's by far the way to go. I am optimizing the evals for opportunity cost. Okay? My time is far more valuable than the cost of that eval. It's just a chore. It's a job to get them passed, add the fundeds back to the arsenal, back to the quiver, back to the army, and move on with my life. All right, that's how I approach it. Okay, so passing prop firm evaluations, tests, evals. I like to touch on this here in the tomb every so often, obviously for your prop trading business, which is what you should think of it as, right? There is an ROI. There's revenue generation. There are expenses, whether or not you're making money in it or not yet. Believe me, you are running a business, like it or not, right? As you're trading props. So, obviously a necessary thing when trading prop is the ability to pass evals and do so quickly, efficiently, and reliably. So I like to touch on this every so often. So I want to take you guys through kind of the afternoon. The afternoon, I think, is the best time to, I should say, dedicate to passing evals. I think the morning time is far too valuable and should be used for your fundeds, even, late morning, midday. But afternoon time, a lot of times, is going to be the time where, you spend some time trying to pass your evals. So let's talk about it. So first of all, my approach to doing so, I'll keep this short and sweet. My approach to doing so, it differs from my approach to the fundeds, of course. So you guys know, in funded accounts for prop, let's use a 50K funded account as an example, just because it's a very popular one. You can adjust the numbers as necessary for other sizes. Go off of the drawdown, by the way, right? Not the advertised amount. So rather than, 6xing the numbers from a 50K to a 300K, you would 3x if the drawdown at the prop you're at is 3x. Okay, it's common to see, 2,500, 7,500. For example, it's different at every prop, so you got to run the numbers. My point being, use the trailing drawdown or the drawdown in general as your X factor, not the marketing advertised account size that is completely irrelevant and only used for marketing purposes, okay? But we're going to use 50K fundeds as an example here just because they're very, very popular, and I think they're a great workhorse account size. So if I'm trading anywhere from 2 to 5 micros, okay, let's say, for example, here on NQ, 2 to 5 micros and a 50K funded, depending on volatility. If volatility is very, very high, that'll go down a little. If volatility is more normal, I might creep up into, 3, 4, 5. In order to pass the eval, okay, what do I do? Oh, and by the way, in the fundeds, I'm trading B- setups and up, according to RAM. Okay, what I would classify as B- setups and up. Now, listen. My approach to evals, I want to be very clear. I can only tell you my truth, right? And again, this is just a math equation. So when I need to pass some evals, okay, I'm looking to beef up my fundeds at prop firm X, whatever, you got to get it done. My approach is as follows. The higher ROI factor you are running in your prop trading, the more aggressive you should be in passing evals, even if it means your pass rate starts to slip a little bit. If you can have a 75% pass rate, for example, but it takes you 3 weeks to pass the eval, or let's say an 85% pass rate, a 90% pass rate, but it takes you 3 weeks to pass the eval. That's not a flex, right? Because if you're a positive ROI trader, we already know that you have statistical edge. If you trade 1 micro, it's a relatively high probability that you're going to pass that eval. That's not the point. The point is you're a positive expected value prop trader. You have edge. You're positive ROI in your prop trading business, correct? Evals, I don't care what firm you're at. Let's just say it how it is. They are too cheap to spend 3 weeks passing them if your ROI is meaningfully above 1. Break even. At a bare minimum. They're too cheap. What is more expensive, quote unquote? It's the time, the opportunity cost that you just spent 3 weeks to get 1 funded, for example. If and there's an ego hurdle for a lot of people here. If you started, saying, you know what? Okay, I'm going to take the Nico approach. I'm going to trade a little bit bigger, not 10 minis in a 50K, right? But let's say I'll trade, 1 to 2, maybe 3 if volatility is a bit low, minis. And I'll take, D setups it up. And just do my best to scalp, take more quick hitters, be more ruthless in cutting, and get through this thing. And as I get to 2/3 to 3/4 of the way to the buffer, I will size down into micro territory, more like maybe 3 to 5 micros, and get over the finish line. Why do I do that? Again, I'm just telling you my truth. The reason that I do that is because as I have invested more time, the number one asset in my head is time. Time. The ROI is positive. We don't have time to spend a ton of it passing evals. So as I invest more time into a particular eval or set of evals, I want the probability of me passing it to go up, which means sizing down into the finish line, which I typically start to do when I'm maybe 2/3, 3/4 of the way to the finish line, which should not take too long. Again, if you're trading a prop firm eval that is pass in 1 day, single day pass, I prefer to get them done in a single afternoon as quickly as I can while trading responsibly. I'm not a fan of pinning evals against each other on news events. I think it's extraordinarily silly. I think it's short-sighted. I think you're asking for problems in the future at that prop firm. And then, someday if they happen to ban you or whatever, you'll throw your arms up and say, why'd they ban me? Well, because that's a silly thing, dude. These evals are not difficult enough to pass, and they shouldn't take you so much time to pass that you have to do that. Even if your success rate, your pass rate starts to slip a bit because you're trading a bit bigger, taking a little lower quality setups on average, not waiting all day for one setup in the eval. Your ROI will thank you because you will have more mental capital and more time spent back in the fundeds. My goal, again, do whatever you'd like, but let me just tell you what I do. My goal here is to keep my pass rate on evals reasonably high. It's reasonably high, quite so. But I don't care if it's 100%. What I care about is spending as little time in the evals as I can within reason while still trading them semi-responsibly. Keeping my pass rate reasonable. I'm not looking to add expenses for the sake of fun, but if my expenses are a bit higher, I really don't care at all. You want to be in a situation where you are too profitable to care at all, and your entire goal is to spend as much mental capital in the fundeds as possible, as little in the evals as possible, and you see it as just a necessary evil passing the evals in order to spend more mental capital in the fundeds, okay? Now, you don't want necessarily your pass rate to dip to like 5% or some crazy number in a 50K account especially, right? That's extraordinarily low. You're definitely jacking up your expenses for no reason. But dude, if you're passing half of your evals, you're doing great. And let me tell you something. Again, they are too cheap. They are way too cheap to care. Okay? If your ROI is meaningful, again, meaningfully above break even, then your number one concern should be spending as much mental capital as you can in the funded accounts. Okay? Now, there's an asterisk here. If you have not taken payouts yet, or even a payout yet, by the way, again, totally cool. Everyone starts with 0 payouts when they start trading prop, right? Obviously. That's fine. That's not an ego thing. You're saying, wow, I feel really bad about that. Why? That's just the stage you're at. Who cares? But you don't have part of the ROI equation yet. You have nothing to compare your expenses to, which means that you should try to keep your expenses as low as possible until you prove that you have meaningful expected value, until you prove that you have a statistical edge. So in the early days, I would encourage a newer trader, at least someone who's newer to prop, to spend as little as they can on evals and treat the eval like a testing ground because they're so inexpensive. Treat it as a testing ground to, show a meaningful edge, a meaningful expected value. Get into a funded, get yourself to payout territory, get that ROI above 1. Get it above break even. Once you're there, now it's just now everything I said previous to that, it's just that math equation. Okay? Spend as much time in the fundeds as possible. Keep your expenses, reasonable without, in my opinion, again, the way I treat it, I don't care. For me, the ROI, I look at the ROI, it's like I do not care. I don't care if my expenses were to double. I just don't care. As long as I can spend more mental capital in the fundeds, more time trading the fundeds. Okay, now again, I don't want my pass rate to slip so ridiculously so, but let me tell you something. When I'm looking to pass evals, I'm not spending 3 months to do it. On single day pass evals, I try to pass them basically in a day. Well, basically in an afternoon or less, right? It's not taking too long. On minimum trading day test accounts, 5 days, you got to trade. I will try to basically hit the max I can make in one day, which a lot of times is 50% of the total profit on day one. If I do so, day two, I try to do the same thing. If I do so, I'll basically flip day 3, 4, and 5. Make sure you check the prop firm rules that you're trading at to ensure that that's allowed. Okay, but that gives me, it's like, oh man, day 2, I didn't quite hit the goal. Okay, day 3, I try to get over the finish line there, and then I flip 4, 5. Okay, all this to say, I'm not inviting you if you have, a negative ROI, which again, that's fine. In the early days, you have to spend money before you ever can take a payout because you have to get in accounts, right? Everyone starts with a negative ROI when in their prop journey. Of course, everybody does because you have to spend money to get in the accounts. I'm not inviting you to jack up your expenses for the sake of saying, well, I don't care about my expenses. That's kind of a thing that you earn by having an ROI that is good for you, whatever that number may be. Okay? Think of this like someone who, a media buyer, someone who's running advertisements. Think of it this way. If they're spending a lot of money, but they're getting a positive ROI, is it better to get a 1.5x ROI, for example? Ideally, in the prop world, your number will be higher, of course. But in the ad buying world, a 1.5x ROI, that's great. It's pretty good. We could do better, but that's pretty good. Is it better to get a 1.5x ROI, for example, for the sake of comparison, on, a $10 million ad spend? Or is it better to get a 10x ROI on a $500 ad spend? If the end goal is pure profit number. Now you could say, yeah, but I'd take that and I'd scale it. Okay, look, I mean, listen, it doesn't scale 1-to-1 in that world. Okay. I'll take the $5 million profit, correct? No one cares what the ROI number is. Your family isn't gonna, love you more if you have a higher ROI X in your prop trading. All that they are gonna see, and hopefully they'll love you regardless, right? But all they're gonna see, is what's dad bringing home? What's mom bringing home? What's my husband or wife, like, how are they doing? Oh, wow, they did a lot better this year than they did last. I'm so proud of them. That's tremendous for our family, man. That's really good. If you make, hundreds of thousands of dollars or $1 million or $3 million in a year, do you really care if your ROI was, 5x or 15x or 27x? Do you really care what it was? Do you care if you had to spend $150,000, for example, over, a year, but you made $3 million? Do you really care? And I'm not saying you're even going to spend that much. I mean, that's already like high expenses, okay? But even if you did, who cares? You need to think about this differently if you're struggling with that, okay? Now, again, in the beginning, there's not a ton to go around, okay? So you got to keep an eye on those expenses. Use the eval as your extremely inexpensive testing ground to get positive expected value, to get your edge, to ensure that you have it. I'm talking to those of you who do have it and are now looking to scale. Your goal is profit, correct? Your goal is not how few evals can I trade. Nobody cares. And if they do care, they're focused completely on the wrong thing. Get far away from them. They lost sight of the goal. Get away from them. The goal is profit, right? Now again, don't throw your pass weight out the window for fun. Try to keep it reasonable for the sake of respecting yourself, not slipping into bad habits, and for the sake of keeping your expenses, within the ballpark, right? But like, if you're taking a lot of payouts, as long as the profit number is going up, does it really matter that much what the expenses are? We're here for a positive ROI, and then to make that profit on top of it as big as possible. This is just a math question. This is just logic. I feel like it needs to be said. I know some of you guys are like, dude, this is so obvious. Well, it's not. Evidently so, it's not to a lot of people out there. Not even just in the trading world, by the way. Not even just in the prop world. This is in every business world imaginable. It boggles my mind that this even needs to be said. I would rather spend $1 million and make $3 million profit than spend $10 and make $10,000 profit. Put the ego aside, stay focused on the goal. Okay, when you have positive expected value, your goal is this: maintain as much time as possible during prime market hours to allocate toward your fundeds. Okay, spend as little time as possible in the evals once your ROI is meaningfully positive, without doing dumb things that can cause you problems in order to pass them. So again, for me, I can only tell you my truth, and then you look at it and say, okay, is this how I want to approach it? What I do is I say, all right, in the fundeds, I'll trade 2 to 5 micros in like a 50K funded, for example, and I'll take B minus setups and up. But in a 50K eval, I'll take 1 to 3 minis to start. By the time I'm 2/3 to 3/4 of the way to the buffer, I size down into the micros, maybe 3, 4, 5, 6 micros. And the whole time I'm taking like D plus scalps and up. The higher grade, the better. But if there's something reasonable there that's driven by RAM methodology, by RAM logic, even if I wouldn't take it in a funded, I'll put it on. I'll put it on an eval. I'm not worried about it. All right, listen. When your ROI is meaningfully positive, they're too cheap to go and spend weeks and weeks and weeks of potential, of opportunity cost, just to keep your pass rate a few percent higher. That's not the measuring stick here. That's not the goal. Don't get lost in ego. Okay, I'm telling you, it's not worth it. Stay focused on the goal. Pass those evals. Do so responsibly, right? Trade with a meaningful intention. I don't want you guys doing random things. But once your ROI is meaningfully positive, this is more of a business lesson than anything. Because again, prop trading is a business, dude. Once your ROI is meaningfully positive, I wouldn't be sitting in an eval for 4 weeks trading 1 micro because I got to pass this thing because I don't want to blow a $30 eval or a $200 test account, whatever. This is a psychology problem at that point. That's a business mindset problem. All right, business expenses are fundamentally different than personal expenses or fun expenses. They're just different. You got to think about it differently. You got to put on a different hat. Again, when that ROI is positive. If it's not, you have to think about this a little bit differently. Keep those expenses low when it's not positive. All right, but as you start turning that corner, and especially once you're, full speed out of that corner, you got to put on that different hat, start looking at this a little bit differently. All right, hope that helps. Question, are there any considerations with taking profits maybe a little bit early or downsizing on larger entry bars, larger trades for eval accounts specifically? You take a look at bar 5 from today, went more than half an ATR in the money and then ended up turning around. Should we be going for a half ATR, whole ATR on, again, eval specifically is the question. So yeah, let's take a look at bar 5. Now again, we did eval talk earlier in the tomb talk, but I'm going to add to this. Okay. So if you missed that part, go back. We talked deep on evals. But here's the nuance I'm going to add on evals. Remember, guys, I'm taking D+ and up setups on the evals. Those are obviously, they're going to come a little bit more often when you start letting the quality slide down. Again, in fundeds, I'm only taking B- and up. I have no temptation to cheat on that because that provides me with the desired result, which is to make money, right? But in evals, my number one priority is the opportunity cost. Okay, so you may remember earlier in the Tomb Talk, I said, and it's interesting because this is before I even read the question we're now answering, I said in the evals, again, 1 to 3 minis in a 50K eval, for example, to start. I get 2/3, 3/4 of the way to the finish line. Then I size down to micros into the finish line to make a higher probability, or I guess to procure a higher probability that I will get to the finish line by sizing down into the finish line because I've now invested more time into that eval. And what's my number one concern when trading evals? Opportunity cost, time. Okay. So, I scalp more often than not when I'm trading evals. Now, when you guys see me on continuation trades, let's say we take an A continuation trade. Let's say like it's a little later in the day, things are a little bit more developed. I take an A continuation trade in the fundeds. If I see a setup like that, then I'm probably going to give it at least 3/4 or a full ATR in an eval as well, because it's a really high quality ram continuation. We're talking like 3 clean bull bodies, closes barely any wick. It's beautiful. It's a trend day. Yeah, I'm going to try to get more out of that, more juice out of that, because the setup's so high quality. It's 1 less trade or 3 less trades I have to take, whatever, in that eval. But on a setup like this, if I were going to trade this setup with an eval, for me, I'm just going to book half to maybe 3/4 of an ATR and move on. Why? Because since I take D+-ish and up setups in evals, rather than sitting around and waiting for B- and up, the next trade is going to present itself a bit quicker, right? The quality, the grading scale is down because we're worried about time. We're worried about opportunity cost. We're not worried about maintaining as much edge as humanly possible. I'm just trying to get some edge and get through the eval because time is super valuable and evals are too cheap. Assuming you have a positive expected value for the amount of money you're producing when you put your mental capital toward the fundeds. They're too cheap. We don't have time for this. Doesn't mean just go gamble them. Do a reasonable job trading, right? But we got to get through them because the opportunity cost is more expensive than the cost of the eval by a ridiculous degree. That's just the reality. If you're a trader who has a positive expected value, which, of course, that's the whole goal here, right? So, again, earlier in the Tomb Talk, I said, I'm doing all those things and I'm scalping my way through. Now, when I say scalp with RAM, where does your mind immediately go as far as profit target? About a half ATR, right? When I'm going for a full ATR or a full R, that's a scalp swing hybrid. Now, that's a lot of my trades in the fundeds because they're good trades. They're high quality. They give me a good amount of edge, right? But they only come around so often. They do come around often, especially when, we're in like a bigger move and the volatility's high, or especially like a trend day. They're coming back to back to back. But on any regular afternoon, which is when when I am trading an eval or 2 or 3, that's when I'm going to do it in the afternoon. You're not always going to get those conditions, and I just got to get through it because time is the most valuable asset, right? Opportunity cost is very real. So I'm scalping my way through half ATR targets again, unless I get some ridiculously high quality RAM setup. Then I'll squeeze more juice out of that one just because the quality's so good, even in the eval. But on any regular setup, I'm booking a half ATR-ish, looking for the next trade. I'm just trying to get to that 2/3, 3/4 of the way to the finish line as soon as possible, size down, keep taking scalps, get through it, move out my life. Again, passing the eval, it's just a job. It's just a chore. You just got to get through it. I'm not looking to spend days, weeks, especially not weeks or months, passing this thing, because we got to take the mental capital that is finite put it back into the fundeds where the ROI is so ridiculous. All right, hope that helps. Question. I keep having this voice in my head telling me to max out the amount of evals I'm trading to try to expedite the process here and try to go full time as quickly as possible. So as far as maxing out evals, and I assume the question here is like, is that reasonable or is that getting emotional about it? Well, I think it's both. You're getting emotional because you do want to quit your job and go full time as a trader. And as far as maxing out evals, what they mean here in the question is it reasonable to, for example, copy trade 20 evals at once and try to pass them all, in the same afternoon? So look, you guys know my thoughts on this. So I think the way that I prefer to do, well, I know the way that I prefer to do this, but I think the best way for most people to do this is trade like 1 to 5 evals at a time, because this isn't about the psychology of like blowing the dollar amount. Forget about the dollar amount for a second. We'll come back to that. The beauty of only trading 1 to 5 evals at a time is that it makes all your funded accounts have different start times. Okay? So that's going to clean up your psychology during drawdowns in funded accounts and keep you just doing your job. Because if one account is getting near the buffer, or let's say this, one group of 3 accounts is pulling back toward your drawdown point, right? Or the liquidation point on a funded account. But then you have a set of 3 that's, maybe newer or older, I guess, that was deep in the money, meaning way above the buffer. It's like a little blip. The drawdown's a little blip. So you're like, okay, well, if I take another trade, it happens to be a loser and basically blows this set of 3, I only lose 3. And you're like, well, I have 20 or, 12 or 17 or however many you have. If you pass, and I've seen people run into this a lot, by the way, if you trade all 20 evals at once, pass them all on the same day, and then copy trade all the fundeds, they're going to all basically be at the same spot. And if you do end up in a point where you're in a little bit of a drawdown and things are getting kind of tight, the emotion's really going to step in, because you're going to be like, okay, well, if I lose, 2 more trades, I lose all 20 of my fundeds. And listen, especially for beginner traders, even intermediate traders, a lot of times, that is going to cause you to do stupid things. Okay, most likely. So I think it's really smart to have different start time. And by the way, not only are you kind of hedging your own psychology when you're in the fundeds, which is going to help you just do your job more consistently, you're also kind of, slowly building out your army of funded accounts. And you get into this routine of like, all right, I'm going to trade, 3. Let's say you're not maxed out. I'm going to trade 3 Apex evals this afternoon. The next day comes along, you're like, I'm going to trade a take profit trader test. Next day comes along, you're like, I'm going to finish up that take profit trader test I started, yesterday, or I guess not finish it up, but let's make more progress on it. And I'm going to start a new My Funded Futures test today. Okay. I really, really think that is the way to do this. That is the way that I much have preferred to build out my army of fundeds. Okay. And I think that is going to serve you much better. And it's not just about, it's not just like the money. Again, that is part of it. But this is about hedging your psychology once you're in the fundeds, because when everything has a different start point, again, if you do go into drawdown, it's like, well, if you blow a set of 3, but you have, 26 fundeds, ooh, you're down to 23 now. You know what I mean? Like, have different start times on your fundeds. I see too many people, they pass 20 at once, they start all 20 fundeds at once, and yeah, it's great. You get to take payouts from 20 accounts all on the same day. Fine, really great for your ego. Who cares? Who cares? In a lot of ways, I think it's just more, it keeps everything a little more steady when you're taking payouts from, this group of 3 here on Tuesday or whatever. Oh, I'm going to take payouts from this one tomorrow. Oh, this group of 6, I get to take payouts on Friday. And then you have money coming to the bank more consistently, and you got to think more, mid, especially midterm, but even maybe longer term. I think that is going to keep you much more level-headed than having one big payout hit like once every so often, and then if you go into a drawdown, you blow all 20 at once, or all of them maybe at once from different prop firms all at once, and now you're left with basically nothing, and it's back to square one. That's going to be a roller coaster that personally I wouldn't really want to be on. Okay, so look at it this way: add a few soldiers a day, or add a few soldiers a week. I think you should be aggressive. Get aggressive with it. It is totally reasonable to get aggressive with it. Let's say you want to trade, 4 evals a day, every day in the afternoon after you kind of get your funded work out of the way. Do that. Buy a set, try to pass as many as you can. Whether you want to copy trade them, totally cool. Trade them individually, fine. Trade them, sets of 2 at a time, fine. Get aggressive with it. We're not trying to go slow. Fastest trader wins. The trader who moves the fastest wins, right? But there's a lot of benefit to having different start points on your fundeds. Question, Nico, trading prop firms. What is your opinion on maintaining buffers versus taking profit straight away? Okay, so we talked about this. I went in depth on this on the RAM training that we did on scaling. Okay, it's an hour of scaling talk, and this was part of that. Now, look, as far as building a buffer versus taking profits straight away. Now, in personal accounts, let's talk about that first. In personal accounts, I think it makes the most sense to just come up with a schedule that makes sense to you. Whether it's once a week, once every 2 weeks, once a month, if you're especially lazy and wealthy, once a quarter, whatever. You show up, you trade, and then on that particular day, oh look, it's the 1st. You pay out your profit for that month or that period of time that you've decided on. You just treat it like a paycheck and you get back to doing the work, which is trade by trade, one trade at a time, right? Now with prop firms, I typically operate under the belief that I think most traders should treat most of their funded prop firm accounts as workhorses. When you're eligible, take the money. Okay, I'll repeat myself. When you're eligible for payout, take the money. Whether it's $600, $1,500, $3,000 in one account, whatever, you take the money. If you're like, oh, I'm eligible for 7 payouts tonight, and they range anywhere from $500 to $3,000, whatever, take the money. That's my opinion. Okay, and the reason of that is because a lot of people, they'll try to build buffers, and I think that quite a few prop firms, at least as of March 2026, are moving away from that. And this is likely to still be very relevant no matter when you're watching this, because the industry as a whole, there seems to be a push toward live, okay, and a push away from massive record-breaking payouts. And we know that for massive record-breaking payouts, obviously, a lot more risk was being put on and buffers were being built. They had to be. Okay, but what are you also doing if you're trying to build a buffer? Well, you're trying to get to a point where you can put on more risk per trade for the sake of trying to get a larger payout. Okay, but effectively, what are you actually doing? You're leaving your money that is technically eligible for a payout request in the hands of the prop firm. And my thinking has always been the following. Why would I do that? Okay, if I can take the payout, get it in my pocket, get it in my bank, then if you choose to go use that money to go fund a personal account, great. But what you've now effectively done is you've offloaded any third-party risk right? I'd rather have the money in a bank than in a firm, regardless of the industry. Right? Third-party risk is something we've talked about a lot. Not that I'm so concerned, but there's third-party risk in anything that you have your money sitting in that isn't your bank. Okay, there have been plenty of brokers, for example. This especially happens offshore, but just for example, people have money in an offshore broker, and all of a sudden, poof, they disappear. It's like, well, you could have taken that money out and put it in a bank, and you offload the third-party risk. Now, prop firms, am I so concerned? Not particularly, but it's not my company. I don't know, right? I'd rather, if I'm eligible, give me my money. I don't want you holding my money. Give me my money. And if I want to put that in a personal account and trade with it, tremendous. If I want to stash it in the S&P for the next 60 years, tremendous. It's my money. Give me my money. I'm eligible for the payout. I don't care what the number is. If it's a tiny amount, if it's a pretty decent amount, if it's one account, or if it's 20 accounts. Just give me my money that I'm eligible. I will decide what to do with it from here. It's mine. Put it in my bank. Now, that's the way that I look at this, okay? Because it is yours. And by the way, something to consider is by building buffer, sure, you're able to put on more risk, but you could also take that money and trade it in a personal account, right? You're not necessarily closing the door, okay? But just by getting into your bank. But also, if you're building a bigger buffer, there's still concern for, copy trader risk, glitches kind of thing, right? I don't know. I mean, there's a lot to consider here, right? Copy trading is not quite as streamlined and pretty as just trading a single personal account. We know that, obviously, right? You're dealing with 10, 20, 30, 40 accounts when you're copy trading, right? And anything over 5, you start to deal with little things here and there. Now, copy traders have gotten so much better. So much better. Again, as of March 2026, they're so much better than they were even just a year ago. But still, it's cleaner to just trade a single account that's a personal account. Okay? But I've seen a lot of people who try to build buffers for the sake of taking big payouts. And I think it's a little bit of an ego thing. It's, I think in part because on social media, people want to post, even if they're not particularly active on social media, if they want to post a big payout certificate or something, which more power to you. That's great. Is that worth it though? Because a lot of people I've seen try to build buffers because they're going for a certain number. They're like, I want to get this payout, and then print it out and put it on my wall. And then in doing so, they're putting on more and more risk. And then they have an emotional mishap day and they blow $500,000 or insert X value here, whatever, that they could have requested. They could have already requested that amount, but they're building a buffer. I think it's so unnecessary, guys. For prop firms, I currently operate under the assumption, or I guess under the belief system, that prop firm funded accounts are workhorses. The vast majority of them, and by the way, if you want to scale in a couple of them for fun, man, it's your career. If you want to take 3-year fundeds and have a good time, you weren't a trader, so you had to be a stick in the mud all the time, right? But like the majority of your funded accounts, if not all of them, should be treated as workhorses. When you're eligible, you take the money and move on to the next. You just try to stack payouts. How much are they? Don't care. Stacking payouts. It adds up, dude. You're going to have some small, some medium, some bigger, and it's going to add up regardless. Treat them as workhorses. Get money coming into the bank account. And if you still want to trade with it, then throw it into, a personal account. And a lot of people will say, yeah, but it's a taxable event. Well, talk to your accountant, okay? I'd rather trigger a taxable event than not take the money that's mine. right? Just for the sake of some ego-driven, let me build a buffer and I can risk more. Yeah, well, I can do that in a personal account too. Give me my money type thing, right? All right, guys, hope that helps. Question, Nico. For prop firms, would you recommend having a certain number of funded accounts at the ready or having some number of evals always in process? No, listen, the way that I approach this is it doesn't matter what firm, it doesn't matter how many days it takes you to pass or if it's 1 day or what the max number of accounts is. The way that I approach this is effectively the same. If you need to add some accounts to your quiver, dedicate some time in the afternoon to getting a bit aggressive, right? Still trading reasonably and responsibly, but loosening the reins a tad compared to your maybe B- minimum when it comes to trading fundeds, right? Because opportunity cost is a huge thing in evaluation or test accounts. That's the number one consideration, at least for me, is opportunity cost. Now, again, you have to consider you don't want to go crazy and start doing things that the prop firms aren't going to like. Okay, that's going to put you on the chopping block potentially. So still trade responsibly, but you can get a bit more aggressive. Don't go crazy, okay? This is this is not black and white. This is, you need to look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, I'm just going to get a bit more aggressive. I'm not going to go crazy, gambly behavior. All right. And then I like to have different start times on sets of accounts. So, if the max is like 20 accounts, if I need to add some accounts, I prefer to do it in a way where I'll take an afternoon and try to pass somewhere between like 1 and 5. And then I have different start times because I'll activate those for the next day. And then I have different start times for the accounts. I find that that's the best way to do it because psychologically, you don't have a whole bunch of accounts with the exact same balance. And then if you go into drawdown, it freaks you out. You start doing dumb stuff. If you're about to take a payout, you're $100 away. You're really aware that you're $100 away. And a lot of people start doing dumb things. If you have different start times, it gets a little bit more confusing to keep track of all that, but in a positive way where your attention is easily redirected to just the right thing to do, which is the next trade, one trade at a time. Okay, so don't overthink this, guys. Should we have evals at the ready all the time? Maybe if you're gambling with prop firms, but you shouldn't be doing that because you're going to get banned eventually if you keep doing that. Okay, trade responsibly, trade small per account, scale this thing horizontally. That is, I've made it very clear. That is clearly the way to most effectively trade prop firms. Scale horizontally in prop firms, scale vertically in your personal account or accounts. Okay, and if you ever need to replace some accounts in the prop firms, whatever firm it might be, if you're like, oh, I need to replace some accounts or I'd like to add some to my quiver, then worry about it. Okay, when you're in the fundeds, look, all your attention needs to be just on the next trade, not how can I need to have some at the ready. It's like you're already assuming that you're not going to succeed with this set of accounts. Look, if you have to replace a few accounts, great. Replace those accounts when the time comes. In the meantime, focus on building out your quiver of fundeds. Okay, take some time in the afternoon to trade some tests or evals to build it out. But if you're maxed out, just focus on the fundeds you have. And then there will come a time eventually where you hit a bit of a losing streak, a statistical anomaly, whatever. A glitch happens, knock on wood, right? And it's like, oh man, I have to replace a set of accounts. Big deal. That's part of the industry, guys. Then you will go ahead and face that and spend some more afternoon time and bring those back. But until then, focus on the fundeds.